As more countries around the world move to change the law, fresh proposals are back on the table here in Scotland.
The MSP looking to change the law to allow assisted dying in Scotland has won the right to introduce his bill in the Scottish Parliament.
As MSPs explore the controversial issue for a third time, campaigners fighting to legalise it claim the tide is turning on assisted dying.
Opponents are concerned the move would put vulnerable people at risk. Campaigners.
It's one of the most emotive debates facing the country.
You respect people's wills when they die, so why do you not respect their wishes when they're alive?
Supporters and opponents of a change in the law around assisted dying have made compelling arguments.
There is an idea of living well and an idea of dying well, and you don't need to put all the emphasis on the dying.
Now it's over to MSPs to decide.
I fundamentally believe that in any society it should be easier to access support to live than it should be to access support to die.
Not changing the law has consequences, and I think that's the message that comes through loud and clear from dying Scots, from those who have lost a friend or a family member to a bad death.
Similar legislation has been rejected by MSPs twice before, but this time a proposal to change the law down south is progressing through Westminster.
The ayes to the right, 330. The noes to the left, 275. The ayes have it, the ayes have it.
So what will Scotland do? Rona Tynan's story is one which reflects the complexities of the debate. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis more than 2 decades ago.
I am still living a good life, loving being married, loving having my children, absolutely loving my friends, and we go on holiday still. And I think without such a great husband and children and family and friends, my life probably would be a lot more different.
Rona knows that having the right support is crucial for quality of life.
A Highland man who had booked a one-way trip to an assisted suicide clinic in Switzerland is facing a hopeful future thanks to the kindness of a stranger. Rona Tynan reached out to the fellow MS patient, Colin Campbell, after she saw his story here on STV News.
In 2017, Rona persuaded a man who had arranged to go to Dignitas, a Swiss facility offering accompanied suicides, to think again.
I was quite concerned that he was going there, and I was wanting really to know if I could reach out to him and ask him, could I help him? My view was that I really did not want assisted dying. I just felt where there's life, there is hope.
But despite that remarkable intervention, Rona has since changed her mind about whether assisted dying should be available in Scotland.
I've had a lot of time to think about my own condition, and I don't try to look at the negative things of it, but you can't, after 20 years, avoid not hearing things or reading things. And I do know that my life could turn out very badly in the end. It certainly made me realise that I wanted to have that choice.
Rona doesn't know whether she would ever opt for an assisted death, but says having the option would give her peace of mind.
When you're diagnosed with an illness, where maybe it's short term, you don't have long left to live, you could have maybe 3 months of, still enjoying life, but knowing at the end of it you're not going to have to go through that horrific, not being able to breathe, being in agony. Well, I just think that would make people feel so much better. And I just think it opens up choices. And choices here are extremely important.
Rona sees having that choice as an extension of the autonomy she values so much in her life.
It's not even about dignity, it's about just the pain, to take away people's pain for them. And I know what happens, not being able to breathe properly, choking, just in absolute agony. It's just a horrible thought that the one last thing you want to do is respect. You respect people's wills when they die, so why do you not respect their wishes when they're alive?
Next week, MSPs will vote for the first time on the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill. It proposes letting someone with a terminal diagnosis request help from 2 doctors to end their own life. It's been introduced by Lib Dem Liam McArthur.
I've had the opportunity to speak to many, if not most, of my colleagues. I think what is interesting is that certainly for those who are coming at it for the first time, it can be quite a sort of scary concept to get to grips with.
It's not the first time the Scottish Parliament has faced this issue though. In 2010 and 2013, Margot MacDonald launched similar proposals, which both failed to clear the first hurdle. But last year, an assisted dying bill for England and Wales, brought by MP Kim Leadbeater, passed its first major vote at Westminster. Liam says the mood has shifted.
I was very keen to give Parliament an opportunity to reconsider this issue, not least given the fact that around 2/3 of the MSPs that were elected to this Parliament weren't here in 2015. I haven't had a chance to debate or vote on it, so I think the time is right.
Liam believes the introduction of additional safeguards since Holyrood last voted will improve the chance of his legislation getting through.
The diagnosis would need to be made by 2 separate medics. They would need to be, I think, convinced that the individual was informed of all the options that were available to them. There would be a wait period of 14 days between where a request is made and when the medications could be provided. A lot of the safeguards, as I say, that we see working very effectively in all these other jurisdictions.
But many MSPs remain unconvinced.
I don't support the assisted suicide bill, and I don't support it because I really worry about what it means for disabled people and people like me.
From the outset, Labour MSP Pam Duncan-Glancy has been a vocal opponent of the bill.
People kind of inherently think choice is a good thing, right? And of course it is. But actually this is not about voting on the principle of choice. When people engage with it on a really kind of basic level, do you want to die? Well, of course people do. But once you start to look at the detail and what it could mean and what we could be legislating for and what the implications could be for disabled people, people usually begin to question it.
Pam worries that perceptions of disability could lead people into feeling pressured into prematurely ending their own lives.
There is a vanishingly small number of things I can do for myself. Other people have to do almost everything for me, including help me to the toilet, help me to get showered, get me undressed, dressed, go to bed, etc. Everything. So I understand that people are frightened of loss, and I understand that people are frightened of loss of function. People do think it's quite undignified to have to rely on someone else. Until we change that sort of perception, it's very, very difficult for me to see a circumstance where we're not indirectly coercing somebody to come to the conclusion that they don't want to be at that point in their life relying on other people because of the perceptions of what it means to do that and to rely on other people.
We spoke to a woman with multiple sclerosis who is passionate about having the right to decide when and how she dies. She believes that's an extension of the autonomy and the independence that is so important to her as a disabled person. What is your response to that?
I remember when I very, very first engaged with this debate, probably about 15, 16 years ago. The first question I sought to understand in my own head about my own opinion was, if I want autonomy in life and choice in life, don't I also want that in death? And of course, we do, but I came to the conclusion that it's about having choice and autonomy over what support you have around you at the point at which you're going to die. And that's about good palliative care.
There are few people who understand the value of palliative care as well as Alexander Brodie.
So you were on this ward for 6 months, is that right?
6 months.
And then you moved?
And then
5 years ago, he was admitted to St Margaret's Hospice after reaching the end of his treatment options for a rare form of blood cancer.
I would never wish my worst enemy to be going through what I was then going through, and have thought about it in those terms ever since. Really, my life was to be measured in days rather than months. To think that when a whole team, including 2 or 3 consultants, thought that there was nothing more they could do for me, that this will be a correct judgment. And I find it extraordinarily interesting what happened next.
Over a few days, Alexander felt his condition slowly improve.
I knew I was supposed to feel a little bit worse, but I was feeling a little bit better. And I do believe that the reason for this, the causal thing that was making all the difference was this feeling of love and compassion that I sensed as coursing through the hospice, through what everybody was doing.
Alexander spent more than 4 years in the hospice before returning home to his wife. He believes that instead of assisted dying, there should be more focus on end-of-life care.
If this bill goes through and something is being done by government in terms of providing the facility of assisted dying, then that takes one's eye over the large question of how palliative care should be provided, not for the few who get into a hospice, but for the country, so that palliative care becomes an important part of the work of the National Health Service.
Liam McArthur says palliative care has been an important consideration.
I've been very clear that this is not a zero-sum and either-or. We need greater investment in palliative care, partly about the quality of that palliative care, but often actually the access to that palliative care.
We're all well aware of the issues facing the NHS and the third sector. How feasible is it to both financially and emotionally add the extra burden of assisted dying or palliative care onto what they're already dealing with?
It's not about either trying to save money or incurring great expense. This is about giving dying Scots greater choice at the end of life. I'm confident that it can be embedded within our health and care system. I think that gives it a greater degree of transparency, I think a degree of confidence that the safeguards can be robustly enforced.
Ahead of this momentous vote, politicians are wrangling not only with how a change in the law would work in practice, but also with the weight of responsibility to get the decision right. The public won't have a direct say in whether assisted dying is legalised or not, but the outcome will undoubtedly have an impact on all of our lives at some stage. We pulled together a panel of members of the public to find out what matters to them in this national conversation.
I am very much pro-dignitas, dignity in dying.
I think just now I'm very neutral on the matter.
I am neutral, but swaying more towards for.
I am against it.
Your views somewhat influenced by your religious beliefs, is that fair?
Yes,
How would you say that informs your opinion?
In terms of my religious belief, coming from a Christian background, definitely for the Christian background, what you can't give, you don't take.
I recently came to faith, maybe 5 years ago. This is another reason it's quite a difficult subject for me. Going back to the death of my granddad, there was maybe a week where there was just nothing there, and you kind of look at him and you're like, God, like, why are you making them suffer like this?
I had my mum kept alive on a life support machine for a week, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. The pain and suffering that we expect people to go through, in my mind, is criminal, because we wouldn't put an animal through that.
I think it is true, like you wouldn't do it to a dog.
You wouldn't.
I just think there's potential for a bit of a grey area there, or if somebody with a disability feels like they can't live a full life anymore, what constitutes as a terminal illness? What
constitutes terminal illness? Because we all know, basically, even medical assessments sometimes say this individual might pass on this, maybe at this particular time, or sometimes they might go beyond that. Sometimes they might go earlier than that. So that might also be a very grey area where it might be, if like the bill is passed, decisions might be made and then they might be wrong. It still goes back to my position whereby life is sacrosanct, basically, so we really need to respect it.
The thing that worries me, I suppose, like I was saying, like, people can get better. I fundamentally do not want assisted dying to become a healthcare option. I think that's where I'm at. Instead of maybe treating somebody for something, we're just saying, well, they can't be treated. Well, there's no funding, we're going to just, here's another option.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't cost effective.
Yeah, exactly. So
this
here's
isn't
another
cost
option.
effective, so here's a pill. That's not what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is People, when they're told you're terminal, you're dying, I'm not frightened of dying. I'm frightened of dying painfully.
That is obviously the key sort of argument, I suppose, but I totally hear what Chris is saying there as well. Like, if the kind of boundaries around it do end up being extended over years to come, then are you in a position where people with extended disabilities or conditions, you know, kind of decide, like, you know, they don't want like this life anymore?
That is the main thing. It's like, if you were to introduce it, where does it end?
Yeah.
Final question to you, Chris and Rona. You're both still somewhat undecided, I guess, in where you fall in this debate. Is there anything that could be said or could be done that would really make up your mind one way or another?
Do I think that somebody should have the right to a dignified death if they're really at a crucial end of life point? Yeah. I remain concerned about how it could elaborate over time and what the impact that could have on people with disabilities.
I feel that if this gets introduced, it's almost going to be a way of healthcare that, well, instead of trying to put thousands into this one person by giving them all the medication they need, all the assistance they need, even the equipment they need, let's offer this because they meet that criteria to get assisted dying, which to me is just, it's morally wrong.
What would it mean to you if this bill were passed?
The only thing I can currently compare it to is how I felt the day that Kim Ledbetter's bill passed. I was gutted. I was genuinely gutted, because I fundamentally got into the role that I'm in just now in politics to change lives, to improve lives, not to end them. And I just would feel deeply sad if Parliament voted for this legislation.
This is the third attempt at changing the law through the Scottish Parliament. If it doesn't succeed this time, will the push inevitably subside?
I think you need to take stock. The time is right for a change in the law. We're seeing moves in the Isle of Man, in Jersey. We're seeing a bill in Westminster progressing. The momentum behind this is pretty irresistible. We can't park this, I think, for another day. We do need to grapple with the detail of it, and I'm confident that's what will happen.
I look back now and think, if I hadn't come here, if I had been left in the hospital and in effect left to die, I wouldn't have experienced any of this. And what I'm now going through is just so wonderful. And what a loss it was to the whole story that could be told about me if this bit was missing.
I'm begging you to go ahead with this. Sometimes it's all about people saying, oh, the poor family having to go through that. But what about the poor person that is actually having to suffer it? So please think and vote wisely, and, you know, let's just bring this bill in, and then all the arguments can begin of how it is to be.